Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this latest edition of the Superintendent Webcast. We have another packed agenda for you today. We've got some information to cover on communication updates. We have Dr. White on with us to talk a little bit about the latest public health information. We know you've gotten some questions around unemployment insurance fraud, so we're going to talk a little bit about that. You may have seen today that we issued some guidance around House Bill 208, which was signed into law. It contains some provisions around how schools will operate next year, but most importantly, how they'll operate for the duration of this year. We want to make sure that you're tracking that. So we'll be sure and cover that. We have spring activities guidance that we'll talk about with you, as well as we've got two districts on, Hardin County and Logan County, on to talk about how they're handling spring activities and events and some of the process they went through. We're excited about their presentations. And then we'll end with a question and answer session. So again, a full agenda, and we'll start off with our Chief Communications Officer, Tony Constatman, to give a communication update. Tony, go ahead.
All right, thank you, Dr. Glass. First and foremost, I just wanted to, in case you missed our announcement last week, we relaunched the Kentucky Academy for Equity in Teaching. The slide is up there for you just to kind of catch up on. I don't want to spend too much time on that, but it is great, just a great time for us to relaunch that with the announcement of $1 million from the Workforce Education Cabinet and the governor. We appreciate the support on that and believe that this is going to help us and our districts do some great things with equity in teaching. So we sent out a release on that, and when you look in your PowerPoint, you'll be able to link to the video in case you missed that announcement, and go from there. The next thing I have for you all is a reminder about our Commissioners Listening Tour. It is going to take place from April 6th through May 6th. And 9 sessions throughout the state. If you all can please share the word to have people pre-register for that event. We are finalizing our details in terms of having students and Team KDE members lead the sessions. Dr. Glass will be doing a TED Talk type discussion at the beginning. People will go into some Zoom meeting breakout rooms, and they will last about 90 minutes. And the joy and glory about them being virtual is you don't have your house, and you get to provide a lot of feedback for us. So we're really looking forward to having those take place. Let me see, it looks like I've somehow gotten out of, there we go. Apologize about that, there we go. This is our deadline, is Friday, again, for the Commissioner's Student Advisory Council. As of today, we have 265 applications that have come in. Roughly 14 spots are open. They are available through for any student in the state, including seats for the Kentucky School for the Blind and Kentucky School for the Deaf. And we have, they are assigned based on Supreme Court districts. So if you know a student that you think would be great to apply for this, please let them know. The application period will not be extended, so Friday is the last day to apply for that. And then also March 17th for the David Karam Award. For some reason, this award has picked up. The nominations we've seen this shared in some national publications. So if you all have somebody outstanding in your districts, please go ahead and nominate someone for that award. And the board will be giving this winner, we'll be announcing this winner in June. And with that, I will pass it off to Dr. White.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks again for having me here with you today. I will be very brief. I think I don't have a lot of new information, but I do want to answer your questions about some new topics. Next slide, please. I just wanted to give you an update of where we are. I don't know if you watch the governor's reports at 4 o'clock when he has those. This purple chart, for again, in case there's someone new that hasn't heard me, every purple bar represents 1 week of cases. in the state of Kentucky of COVID-19. So you can see way over there in the far left-hand corner, back when we had our very first case that was diagnosed in Kentucky. We may have had cases before that non-diagnosed, but that very first week of March the 6th, so this Saturday was 1 year since we had our first diagnosed case of COVID-19. So you can see that we had a little bit of what we thought at the time was a wave when we were having 1,400 people a week that were positive. Then we had a wave in the summertime around July the 6th. And then we had the tsunami that hit us right after Labor Day and went up at an exponential rate. That drop there in the middle is the week of Christmas, where there wasn't a lot of testing being done, and so our case numbers were low, followed by, again, that big peak after the holidays when people were having exposures in ways that we had recommended that they not, but that they did and had some cases. And then you've heard me say a lot of times that 2-point data points do not diagnose a trend, but I think you can look at these bars from the 1st of January and see a trend. We are definitely on a decline. Not as quick of a decline over the last couple of weeks, but a decline nevertheless. And then that little bar there that I believe it says 311, I can't read that, but that's just these weeks start on Monday and end on Sunday. So that little striped bar there is just yesterday's cases. Next slide. This next slide gives you something that we are particularly proud of in Kentucky, that we have vaccinated 845,695 people as of the end of the day yesterday. That is with first doses. So if you look at that red number down there, 1,144,650, that's the number of total doses that have been administered. So a lot of these folks have gotten their first dose and then gotten their second dose. So that is a lot of vaccinations. We are so excited that since the Commonwealth of Kentucky felt that the K through 12 mission was so important, that we prioritized your team and that you are part of that large number there. And so I just wanted you to be aware, something that the governor mentioned yesterday, and I didn't have these numbers, I wrote them down to be sure I remember it, is that 70% of our vaccination has gone to people over 70. Oh, I'm sorry, over 50. 70% is people over the age of 50. So that's where we prioritize people in long-term care facilities as our 1A. We have a few teachers that are over the age of 50, and so they were in that group as well. So 70% of the area that we feel is most vulnerable for death and severe illness have been vaccinated in Kentucky, and that's remarkable. The other remarkable statistic is that we have now vaccinated approximately 25% of the adult population in the state of Kentucky. That is ramping up. We're getting more supply. We're getting more places that you can go to get vaccinated. You can go to our website, and there's a place you can go that can tell you where your area is and all your different options that you can sign up. So for those of you that didn't get vaccinated back in the end of January and the 1st of February, you still are allowed to get vaccinated, even though we've moved on to the 1C. You're still a 1B and you can be vaccinated. And just to be clear, the 1C group also includes colleges and university staff, as well as the pre-K. The governor recognized a couple of weeks ago in his press conference that as the lead of the daycare group over in the cabinet said that the childcare is the company, it's the industry that all other industries in the United States works off of. If we don't have strong childcare, people can't work. So getting those employees vaccinated is going to be very important as well. Next slide. This is the new change, and I know I'm working with Dr. Foster on this. We just sent out some guidance a few weeks ago about what happens after you're fully vaccinated. What you have in your hand that's current right now is not current, and I'm hoping that within the next few hours or however soon that it can go through the channels at KDE, we're going to update that. So I'm going to give you the updated version, and you're going to really like this. This says that if you're fully vaccinated and you have no symptoms, you do not need to quarantine if you're exposed to someone with COVID-19. The risk of you getting COVID-19 is extremely low. Now, they don't quite have enough data to say it's impossible, although I don't know that anybody would say impossible, but the likelihood of you getting COVID-19 is extremely low after you have had your full series. That means either 2 doses of Moderna or a Pfizer, or the 1 dose of the Johnson & Johnson. 2 weeks after you finished that dose, then you do not have to vaccinate. Now, this is different from if you look up what's in your folders right now that was sent out, the CDC originally said that after you would only be exempt from quarantine for 3 months. They are now, with the data that they've looked at, they are feeling very comfortable telling you that until they say differently, you don't have to go into quarantine at all. And that's very exciting for you, for the nation, and certainly for our Commonwealth. If you have had COVID-19, we are still telling you you don't have to quarantine for 3 months after you've had COVID-19. But if you have been vaccinated 2 weeks after that is finished, then you don't have to quarantine after that. So that's very important. Now, let's say you've done your vaccination and you're 14 days after that last dose and you're exposed to someone with COVID and you start getting COVID-like symptoms. That's a different ball game. That means you need to quarantine yourself, get tested, make sure that you have not been one of those very rare cases that does contact COVID-19. The vaccination will protect you from severe illness, hospitalization, and death. It is not 100% guarantee that you will never get infected again. If you do get infected again, it is seen to be very mild. At least that's what the data tells us. And again, it is very unlikely that that will happen. Probably the most important thing you need to hear me say is if you have been vaccinated fully, and it's been 2 weeks after that last dose, that is not time for you to rip your mask off and run wild in the street. That is not what we're saying at all. It is saying that you have a level of protection that no human being in the face of the earth has ever had. Within 1 year of this illness being diagnosed, testing has been made available, a vaccine has been made available, and 25% of the people you live with in this state have been vaccinated, which is beyond remarkable. But we still have to be cautious. So you will still be wearing masks because there is a small risk that you could get infected and could spread this to other people until the data tells us differently. We're going on that thought. So you will wear your mask. You still need to do your separation. The only time you will be with people without your mask on is if you are wanting to go to someone's house or they come to your house and both of you have been fully vaccinated and it's been 2 weeks since your last dose. So that's what's in the newest CDC recommendations. I'm sure there'll be lots of questions and I'll be around. I know you've got a lot to get over. So Dr. Glass, I'll stick around and then be happy to answer questions at the end if that's how you want, or I can answer them now, whatever you and Tony prefer.
Dr. White, how much time do we have with you?
I'm blocked out. Y'all are my Tuesday afternoons.
Okay, well, thanks so much. Well, I think just for the flow of things, we'll keep going and we'll move questions for you up at the end, if that's okay.
Dr. Glass, I would like to add one thing
Sure.
for the superintendents. As Dr. White mentioned, we are in the process of updating the post-vaccination guidance document to reflect these changes, and that should be completed in the next 24 hours, and then it'll be reposted to the web with either, with the current date, probably with tomorrow's date on there. So you can just watch for that, but that will be updated to reflect the most recent CDC guidance. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Kelly. Thanks, Dr. White. Now we'll turn to Robin Kinney and Laura Moore. They're going to talk a little bit about ESSER II funds, PEBT, and new information around that. And we know that some of you have gotten unemployment insurance claims that were fraudulent, and so they have some information on that to share with you as well. Robin and Lauren, are you on?
We are.
Excellent.
Thank
Go right
you.
ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Glass, and welcome to all of our superintendents and our educational partners that are out there with us today. We're going to talk about a little bit of a hodgepodge of things, as Dr. Glass indicated. We're going to spend a little time on ESSER 2 first, and then we'll talk about PEBT, the next round of funding associated with that, and then unemployment insurance fraud. Just a little bit of information to give you directions in case you are getting some questions from either your HR professionals or from your staff and employees. So we very much appreciate our superintendents that came on in the last webcast and were sharing ideas about ESSER 2 and how you were making your plans on how to expend these dollars. If I can go to the next slide, please. This is just a high-level slide to remind us of some of the things we've already talked about. I do want to share with us, once again, sort of those overarching principles that are not contained in the slide, but I'd like to remind everyone about some of the overarching principles. Remember, these funds are to prevent, prepare for, and respond to the coronavirus pandemic. So you should always be asking those questions as you prepare for expenditures. Continue to be thoughtful and strategic. We heard in our presentation from Superintendent last week, lots of work that is going on at the district level in trying to think of the best and most effective uses of these funds for your particular district and the specific needs of your staff and your students. Continue to think about spending them on kind of the more one-time expenditures instead of recurring expenditures, because at some point in time these funds will go away, and so it's important that we be thoughtful in that regard. But this is an incredible opportunity for investments in our students and staff. ESSER 1 and ESSER 2 really have the same permissible uses, and I guess I would point out two major differences as you think about them. That is the time period for the grant. Expenditure of ESSER 1 is through September 30th of 2022, and ESSER 2 is through September 30th of 2023. The other major difference is in equitable services. There are no equitable services requirements for our local school districts for ESSER 2. However, I've kind of noted this in today's presentation because the Kentucky Department of Education has started reaching out and talking with non-public schools as it relates to funding. And we have reached out to some of you to help with that communication to some of our non-public schools. So I really want to thank you for and appreciate your efforts in trying to get the communication out on that pot of funding for our non-publics. You also may receive some questions about that pot of funds that is from the GEARS pot of money. It's the emergency assistance to non-public schools. And if you do receive those questions from your non-public school partners, if you just refer them back to KDE, and we'll try to get them up to speed on that. One of the questions since the last time we've talked, I really wanted to share too that the new assurances and spending plan for ESSER 2 funds is May 15th. You can submit earlier than that if you desire, but May 15th is our deadline for submitting your assurances and spending plan in GMAP. And I've put some information on there about the new Munis project number for direct services and non-direct services. And that is if you want to afford yourself of the opportunity of that state set-aside money. If you are not going to do that, then you can just use that 554G number and code all your expenses that way. Next slide, please. So let's talk about that ESSER 2 assurances. They are available in GMAP right now, and we do look for those assurances to be completed under the superintendent's GMAP login. The deadline is May 15th. That's the latest date. If you are a district who is more ready sooner than that, then of course you can submit that earlier. And then there's some information on this slide about how you can access those GMAP resources. Next slide, please. Likewise, the ESSER 2 spending plan is available in GMAP. We would be looking to make sure that you are expending your ESSER funds in accordance with the Act as passed. And I do want to point out that this is where, on this slide, you can see that where there's a link to the federal funding matrix, and you'll see where it says at this link. That will take you to the links that really talk about permissible expenditures for ESSER 1 and ESSER 2. So you'll be able to see that very quickly what those permissible uses look like. There's also more information on the KDE GMAP homepage, And there's also information out there about the state set aside, but we'll get to that in just a minute. Next slide, please. We have a few operational updates that I just want to share with you. I think when we had talked at the prior superintendent's webcast, we were just starting to get lots of information on this, and this has generated some questions, and we appreciate people sending us questions that we can then post somewhere so that everyone can receive the benefit of that answer. But as part of our operational updates, we are requesting this time that you submit your assurances and your spending plan together in GMAP. When we did ESSER 1, we allowed the assurance to come more quickly and then allowed you a period of time to work on that spending plan. But you'll see as we move along the importance of submitting those together. So we are asking that they be submitted together. The ESSER 2 funding will be available to you upon your submission of the assurance and spending plan in GMAP. And so that's, we've had a few districts asking when would funds be available for reimbursement. ESSER 1 funds are recommended to be used before ESSER 2 funds. That's primarily due to that different time schedule for expenditures, but ESSER 1 funds do not have to be completely expended before you access your ESSER 2 funds. We've had quite a bit of discussion on payment of staff. There's been questions surrounding federal match and reimbursement, those words kind of being used interchangeably. We provided a lot of information to your finance officers at a separate webcast and actually a written document to help them as they navigate those waters on payment of staff. I do want to point out that we do have an FAQ posted at the link that you see on this slide, and we are continuing to take questions through the email covid19@education.ky.gov mailbox, and are updating that ESSER 2 FAQ as we receive a certain number of questions. We'll update that periodically. And then finally, I guess as everyone is buzzing about right now, is that it appears that there may be an ESSER 3, sort of like Groundhog Day, but in a good way, I guess. So ESSER 3 appears that it has a good chance of coming our way. I know the state budget director, John Hicks, reported out to the Budget Conference Committee this morning on the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021, because we have a different title every time we get different money. I wonder sometimes if it's not just to keep us confused, but I think it is a way to differentiate between all the pots of money. We believe if the House is not acted today, it'll be today or tomorrow in Congress to approve that. Preliminary, very high level preliminary, it appears that Kentucky's allocation for K-12 will be approximately $2 billion, another very substantial amount of funds that will be coming Kentucky's way. It likewise has a state set aside out of that. And then it also has some language that is around criteria for expenditure of those dollars. And it appears it will also have a September of 2023 completion for expenditures. We will have a lot more on that to share with you once that gets finalized at an upcoming superintendent's webcast. Next slide, please. If we can talk just a little bit now about the ESSER 2 state set aside. We had talked about this on a prior webcast, and we've also shared some information with your finance officers. This is the $92.8 million that was permitted to be set aside for state uses that the commissioner and the department felt very strongly about returning a pretty good portion of that to our local school districts, or at least availing them of the opportunity to access that. Out of that pot of money, we will be supporting our Kentucky School for the Deaf, Kentucky School for the Blind, our area technology centers, and some projects to support statewide efforts. But the remainder of it, we really wanted to make this as another opportunity for our local districts. We have finalized that the amount that would be available under that opportunity would be $75 per pupil, calculated using that Senate Bill 177 ADA data. That's something that everyone's familiar with. And so we'll be looking at that as far as if you're trying to calculate what that might look like. This is the selection made by your district, either with 1819 or 1920 data for AADA. Next slide, please. So for the ESSER 2 state set-aside fund eligibility, districts will comply with the same ESSER 2 assurances for any additional funding received under the state set-aside fund. So when you go to your assurance document, you will see there that there is a section in the assurance document that basically allows a district to indicate if they desire to participate in the state set-aside. There are two primary criteria. That is, the district agrees to spend 85% or more of your ESSER 2 district allocation on direct services to students. And we had a lot of questions about what are direct services and what's permissible. If you can go back to your our federal funding matrix, and you'll see that on the federal grants webpage. If you go to the ESSER 1 and ESSER 2 link that is contained on that page, you'll see a column in the far right-hand side. And in that far column, you'll see an 85% set aside, and you'll see the column will indicate just yes or no for each line tied to munis codes and commodity categories. So we tried to do that to make it very clear what would fall into the 85% as a direct service and what would not. So I would encourage you and your finance officers to go out and look at that funding matrix, and that will help you as you are making your plans on expenditure of your district allocations. Of course, the second thing as part of that, the district agrees to offer a minimum of 12 hours of in-person instruction per week to students who request it on or before April 1st. And we are asking that to continue through the remainder of the 2021 school year. So those are your two primary assurances that you're making. Next slide, please. As I indicated, we talked about the direct services and those definitions to align with the munis codes. There will be a new spending plan that will ask for you to complete. So when you're completing your initial ESSER 2 assurance document and corresponding spending plan, submitting those together, that's just for your district allocation amounts. So we'll give you a little more time to think about how you're going to expend your state set-aside funds. We will have that new spending plan in GMAP by March 22nd. I apologize, I didn't have that date on there. We're still working on a completion date, but look for that new spending plan for your state set-aside dollars for March 22nd. That's when it would first be available. You would again have until May 15th to submit that. You'll see in the assurance document that we have asked for an assurance to indicate the date on which you received board approval to provide these assurances to participate in the state set-aside fund. So I just wanted to note that for you, that isn't contained in the assurance document. Of course, once the permissible, once you get your state set-aside amount, it reverts back and you can expend those dollars the same as your original district ESSER 2 allocation. You don't have to be following those direct services qualifications again. And then we have also noted the munis project number for you. Next slide, please. We're going to switch topics here now from ESSER and ESSER 2 and the state set-aside, and we're going to talk a little bit about another funding opportunity that is coming to your families through the pandemic EBT program. We are now to round 3 on that, and I've invited Lauren Moore, our Division Director of School and Community Nutrition, to join us to talk about this.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Robin. You all have likely heard by now that the USDA has approved Kentucky's application for round 3 of PEBT. The Cabinet for Health and Family Services will be issuing these benefits starting this month. Benefits will be issued to eligible families and will cover the time period of October 2020 through May 2021. The issuance of benefits will be staggered beginning the week of March 15th. For example, benefits for October 2020 will be issued the week of March 15th. Benefits for November 2020 will be issued the week of March 22nd, and so on until October through February benefits have been issued. The frequently asked questions document, which is linked here on this slide and available on the CHFS website, includes a schedule for benefit issuance. The rate has been increased slightly from the initial 2 rounds to $6.82 per student per day. This increase was the result of adding the snack reimbursement rate to the breakfast and lunch rates. The USDA did allow simplified assumptions to be included in Kentucky's application, and based upon those simplified assumptions, students attending districts providing predominantly virtual instruction from October 2020 until the end of the school year will receive 20 days of benefits each month. Students attending districts that are predominantly hybrid will receive 12 days of benefits each month. Also note that any in-person instruction model that is not the typical Monday through Friday schedule is also going to be considered hybrid. So for example, if a district is operating in person Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday, and doing virtual instruction on Wednesday, this will be considered hybrid for PEBT purposes. CHFS is developing a process for requesting reconsideration. This process is expected to be shared next week, and all questions, including those regarding reconsideration, should be sent to CHFS at the number shown on this slide. SCN has sent information to your food service directors at this point, and also information will be shared with your cases, contacts, and your DPPs. I will remain on the call, of course, for any questions, and Robin, I will turn things back over to you.
Next slide, please. Thank you very much, Lauren. The commissioner asked me also to touch base with you just a little about unemployment insurance fraud. And so I've included a couple of slides on this activity that's happening right now. As many of you are aware, your human resources professionals in your district typically work with the Office of Unemployment Insurance when you have someone that files a claim for unemployment benefits. Unfortunately, as we've heard really in Kentucky and across the nation, we're hearing of lots of fraud that is happening during the coronavirus pandemic. People really trying to take advantage of the misfortune of others. And so this is just another thing that's happened during the pandemic that people are trying to sort through. We do have some staff here at the Kentucky Department of Education that have already been notified and received letters that they did not initiate from UI. And we have put some information on this slide to give you a link to the Office of Unemployment Insurance Fraud website. Next slide, please. We also would encourage you to share because we are hearing that some districts are now experiencing this as well, in addition to state government agencies and other just the general public across Kentucky. So if you suspect fraud, either you have an employee or if someone in your HR professional services suspects that fraud is happening because they've received a notice of a determination letter or an alert from a credit monitoring service, we have provided to us from the Office of Unemployment Fraud Division a website, an email, and a phone number. And we would encourage your HR professionals to work with your employee to provide that assistance in helping them to navigate through this unfortunate circumstance. It does appear that this is going to be with us for a little while. And so we'll all have to just be very diligent as we continue to monitor what's happening and assist our staff to the extent that we can. So we wanted to just provide you this contact information in case your HR professionals don't already have it. So that concludes our presentation today on ESSER and PEBT and UI fraud. And I'll turn it over next to, looks like Chuck Drewsdale is going to follow me with the new guidance on House Bill 208.
Good afternoon, everybody. This is my first time presenting on the Superintendent's Webcast, so it's great to be among all of you. I'm Chuck Drewsdale. I'm the department's Director of Government Relations. This is my first session. And so one of the first bills signed by the governor this session, last Thursday, was House Bill 208, which essentially codifies a lot of the emergency regulations that KDE issued late last summer and early last fall. So from that perspective, most of what you've been doing will not change for the rest of the year. The one essential difference is with non-traditional instruction. Next slide, please. So we can break up the NTI changes into 3 different timeframes. Prior to March 29th, so the next 3 weeks or so, from March 29th until the end of this current school year, and then finally the 2021-2022 school year and beyond. Next slide, please. So prior to March 29th, up until that point, there are no changes in terms of non-traditional instruction. You still have all the flexibilities that you have always had for this school year, and so you can continue to do that. However, you should be planning ahead at this point for what will happen the last Monday of March, and that's what we're going to devote the most of this to. So beginning on March 29th, that is a Monday, students essentially have to have access to a hybrid schedule. That is, every student has to have access to in-person instruction at least 40% of your school week. So essentially that boils down to 2 days. And all school facilities must be open to in-person instruction 80% of the week. That's 4 days a week. So a lot of districts have been working on an A-B hybrid model where you have 2 days a week they're in-person instruction, the other 2 days a week they are remote, while the other cohort comes into the classroom, and then the 5th day of the week. And that has varied among different districts in terms of which day of the week they have used that for deep cleaning of the facilities. So that will work. So if you are on an A-B hybrid model, you can continue that. And I'd like to emphasize that this is a minimum. There is nothing that stops a district from going back 4 days a week, 5 days a week, or allowing most students to go back to the classroom on a hybrid model while allowing other cohorts, for instance, students with special needs or something of that nature, to attend 4 or 5 days a week. That can still continue. The 40-80 model is simply a baseline minimum. Students will not be required to return to the classroom. They can submit a written request to continue remote instruction. For your own needs at your district level, you may want to develop a form or a template for students to fill out, but that is entirely at the district's discretion. Now, obviously, if you are going on this hybrid model, and again, that is a minimum, you can go 5 days a week if you'd like, you can have access to 5 NTI days beyond this date. So the 1 day a week that you're already going to be, for instance, under the hybrid model, all students are going to be remote, that does not count towards your 5 days. So you can do 5 days if you have storms, if there's weather, if there's an outbreak or something of that nature. You can use 5 NTI days, but unlike previous versions of the legislation and unlike what you have until March 29th, there is no flexibility beyond those 5 days. That is a hard cap. You cannot apply to KDE. The commissioner cannot provide any waivers beyond those 5 days for the rest of this school year. If you do have need where you can't use your facilities beyond those 5 days, you'll simply have the flexibility that you've always had in past years, which is to cancel that school day and extend the school calendar further into May or June. Next slide, please. For the 2021-2022 school year, we will simply be returning to statutory practice. There is nothing in current law and there is nothing in House Bill 208 to allow districts to have any more NTI flexibility than has been the case in past years before COVID hit us. So what that means is all districts can submit an NTI plan and they would have up to 10 days. You are not guaranteed 10 days. Your plan is subject to approval by the Commissioner of Education. And you have to, under House Bill 208, districts must submit their NTI plan, which is now called a continuation of learning plan, by May 1st, 2021. This is part of your CDIP, and it's subject to all of those district improvement plan requirements, which you have received guidance on in the past. And when we get to that point, Kelly Foster will be joining us for any more in-depth questions on how that process works. But that is the long and the short of House Bill 208. At a different point into the future, we will be discussing how SEEK funding will be affected by this, but the long and short of that is it will be a continuation of the funding mechanism we have been using for this school year. And with that, I will turn it over to our next presenter. Nikki.
Thank you, Chuck. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm happy to be with you today. I'm going to be speaking to the new guidance document around considerations for spring activities. And so this document provides guidance to schools and districts to assist in determining how best to handle traditional spring activities, such as commencement and honor ceremonies, while still complying with state and local public health guidelines. And we do have local leaders here to present on spring activities, but I wanted to highlight a few elements from the guidance document. So if we can go to the next slide. So here first, local schools and districts should adhere to the Healthy at School guidelines found in the Guidance and Safety Expectations and Best Practices for Kentucky Schools. And so both documents are linked there. The title there is the new guidance document for spring activities, but we've also linked the Healthy at Schools document in the PowerPoint presentation as well. And that document includes, but certainly is not limited to, appropriate social distancing, the use of masks and screening, and sanitation efforts. Local schools and districts also should consult with local public health officials to ensure that all of the appropriate COVID-19 mitigation strategies have been considered. And then we recommend you also create an action plan. So step one would be to determine what events are most important to your school or your district's mission and values. And then for step two, consider alternate scenarios for each mission critical event. So virtual, obviously this option would be the easiest in keeping with social distancing guidelines. And the guidance document includes multiple examples of what virtual options may look like and what may be applicable for your community. Drive-in ceremony, that is discussed within the guidance, and a drive-in ceremony would obviously allow for students, families, faculty, and staff to celebrate in the same location, so a large parking lot or open area, while keeping with social distancing guidelines. And again, students and families could arrive and remain seated in cars, allowing for minimal physical engagement. And then lastly, the majority of the guidance focuses on in-person options. And so the guidance addresses masks and screening, limiting crowd size, social distancing and spacing, and the actual distribution of student commendations, such as diplomas, awards, etc. Step three would be to develop a communication plan. Once the plan has been determined and you have discussed it with local public health officials, you would want to communicate that as soon as possible to all invested parties, so students, families, faculty, staff in your larger community. And then step four, be flexible, as you may need to make changes due to the trajectory of the pandemic over the spring months. And so again, I know we have some presentations to further provide evidence of what this might look like within your local school or district.
Thanks, Mickey. And I think everyone, we recognize that there's going to be tremendous pressure on your communities to restore some kind of in-person activities. And we know that several of you are working on that and thinking about what that might look like. We're not completely out of this pandemic yet. We haven't achieved herd immunity. Everyone is not vaccinated, so we still have to be careful. And one of the toughest things we have to do is manage the expectations that people have right now. So we have a couple of great district leaders and a principal on to talk to us about how they're approaching that question of in-person activities in their communities. First up, we've got Superintendent Morgan from Hardin County. Superintendent Morgan, are you on?
Yes, sir. Great to be here.
Thank you. Go right ahead.
I'm going to be sharing about the activities. We actually presented this to our families on Friday. This happened after our principals at each of our high schools had the opportunity to meet with their senior officers and then their senior classes. The one important thing I will tell you, we have 3 high schools, so we wanted to make sure there was consistency, and we are blessed to have principals that work incredibly well together. So many of you have heard of prom and everything that comes with prom. But we are going to forgo prom this year and have what we're referring to as seniors under the stars. This will be exclusive to the members of the senior class. And we're encouraging families, I'm not sure they'll do this, but we're encouraging them to have semi-formal attire and maybe not go for that $600 to $700 prom dress that a few of our people are trying to sell from last year. And seniors will purchase tickets to these events. It will be outside. We have rain dates. This was shared with the seniors. They are really excited about this. This will be held on school grounds, and the students will have a nice meal and have the opportunity to dance along with social distancing. So you can see on here we have rain dates. We have Central Hardin with May 8th, and they're going to hold theirs at our Early College and Career Center. John Hardin will be April 24th, and North Hardin May 8th with the rain date. So we wanted to make sure we got this information out to families as soon as possible so that they could take and make proper accommodations and make decisions of what they wanted to do from here. I know many of you are concerned that some families may go out on their own and have their own prom, and we're trying to give them an option that is safe, because you notice from these dates, we will still have about 3 weeks of school left, and we do not want anything that would deter from the 3 weeks of education past these dates. Next, Tony, please. Our next thing we are really excited about is our graduation. I realize some of you may have a smaller high school, but one of our high schools has 427 graduates. So if we were to limit those to 200, you're still going to have well over 1,000 people at a facility, and that's just with 2 people. And our seniors were really adamant. They wanted their entire family to be able to join graduation. So what each of us, each of our high schools have decided on is that they will have a graduation ceremony within the school day to where every senior comes. They felt it was really important for the class of 2021 to come together in whole. And so they will gather at the school. They will wear their caps and gowns. They will enter. We will be videotaping and live streaming each of these events, and only seniors and school administrators will attend. This event will include our speeches from class officers, principals, and again, it will be live streamed with our Hardin County Education Community Television on the YouTube channel. After that, we will then have what we had last year, which was each of our seniors will come in at a select time. Some of our principals are allowing those students to select the time so they can select the time close to a time that a peer or friend is having that, so that the peer may be able to see them walk across the stage. But the important thing I want you to notice is that 10 family members will be able to come in person to this. So in lieu of having just 2 people to watch them walk across the stage, they will actually have 10 to walk across the stage, to watch them walk across the stage. We will videotape this, and then we will take and we will combine the ceremony during the high school day. We will then splice the 2 things together, and we will have a video. And at the assigned time of their graduation, which our board will be passing this Thursday evening, then they can have a viewing party and they will see the event that happened at the school, as well as their students coming across the stage with all of their classmates. And then we will also have videos for those students to take home with them. And again, we started by working together with all 3 of our high school principals so that we had consistency. We also have an alternative program, Hardin County High School. They will also be following these same procedures. And during that viewing party last year, we had great success. One of our parents who had 4 prior children to graduate suggested that we do this from now on, that it was a lot more comfortable to watch the ceremony at home. We will be announcing these dates and times to our families again at our March board meeting this month. So again, that's what we're doing here in Hardin County. It was important for us, for all of our high schools, to do similar things, one not to outdo the other, and that we communicate this with our families so that they could prepare ahead of time. So Tony, that's it for Hardin County.
Great. Thank you, Superintendent Morgan. Great job. And we're excited about what's going to be happening for kids in Hardin County. It's clear that you took into account the perspectives of your community and your students, and it put together a great plan. So we're excited to see how that rolls out. Next up, we've got Paul Mullen, Superintendent from Logan County Schools, and Casey Spears, who's the principal at Logan County High School, to talk about their model and options.
Thank you, Dr. Glass. I was asked to present today on drive-through graduation and how we ended up back at a drive-through graduation. So what we did, and I'm going to reflect on last year, take us back to the spring of 2020. There was a lot of uncertainty with COVID-19 looming across our country. You know, if you guys remember, if everyone remembers correctly, we were shutting down for 2-week intervals. It was getting towards the end of the school year, what the traditional end of the school year would be. And we were looking at ways to celebrate. So we believed that we needed closure and recognition for the class of 2020. And we began speaking with students, parents, and community members on how to proceed. What we landed on last spring was a model similar to the Gulfport model with some local additions. Overall, it was a success, and with so many unknowns, everyone was thankful that we were able to have a graduation ceremony, albeit very untraditional. For this process, and it took a while to put it together, I've asked Logan County High School Principal Casey Spears, who has been the principal for 6 years, to take us through the process and how we ended up with the graduation ceremony we did last spring, which was a drive-through graduation. Mr. Spears.
Thank you, Mr. Mullins, and thank you, Dr. Glass, for allowing us to present. As Mr. Mullins said, we kind of borrowed from the Gulfport model. We borrowed from other places. We had a lot of student input. We have a principal advisory council that we utilize greatly. They're really the voice of the student body. And what we figured out was they wanted some type of closure. I know some schools were looking at pushing off graduation, trying to hold traditional ceremonies maybe later in the summer or even into the fall. We considered that, but our students, they mentioned they were going to be going off to work or the military or to colleges, and they wanted some sense of closure. So we were able to get out individual recognition, as you can see the slide. We've done a lot. We do a lot with career signing days. We do college signing days for our students. In addition to typical, you'd have student athletes when they're going on to further their education in their athletic careers. You have those types of signings. We've done those in the past. We do that for all of our seniors who are going to work or going to the military or going on to college. We couldn't do that obviously in person, so we utilized social media. We had one of our business teachers who handles our social media accounts and administrators. They really got on board and created a lot of media spotlights through social media, through Facebook pages for our students. We also had group recognition, as you see there. A lot of the athletic directors in the 4th region came up with a Be the Light night for senior athletes. And what we did was we invited all of our seniors in. We had the feeling at the time that that might be one of the last times they would get together on campus. There's a link to the video there. We won't show that at this time for the sake of time. And then also one of our football coaches put together a video for not just the athletes in the spring who couldn't participate in their sports, but for all of the student athletes. Just quickly about graduation and what we were able to do with graduation. Again, borrowed from a lot of different models. We decided to have a drive-through graduation. Our campus is large enough where we have about 250 graduates last spring. So the pictures that you'll see and all of the details were for last year's event. It was individualized. As you'll see as we go, it took a lot of planning. The logistics are listed there for you. Then we also had a materials list. We had to create everything by hand for the most part because we're in close proximity to Western Kentucky University, and we've had the good fortune of being able to use Diddle Arena for our graduations the last few years. And we work together with them, and they have everything that we need, the stage and everything. So what we had to do is we had to basically build everything from scratch. We had an outdoor graduation. Families were able to drive up. And as you go, you'll get to see the different logistics and procedures that we had. Much like Hardin County, we wanted the graduation video to be a part of it as well. So we were able to film and record speeches from our valedictorian, salutatorian, class president, and then we were able to string all of those together in order to make a video at the end. We sent out our procedures. One of the biggest things that we saw heading in was we were going to have to communicate. We began communicating through all of our social media accounts, through email, the local newspaper, local radio station. We really had to bring everybody on board to make sure that everyone knew exactly what we were planning to do. On the next slide, I believe, is where you'll see one of the key components of our drive-through graduation, and that was the plan that we actually had to put together. And what we asked was we have a fantastic junior ROTC program, a lieutenant colonel and a sergeant major who run that organization, but it was all cadet led, and they came up with the graphic that you're seeing as far as organizing to make sure that traffic flowed, that all the families got to see their graduates walk across the stage that we made, to be able to participate in those types of things and it be fairly seamless. That was one of the biggest helps that we had along the way. Again, it took a lot of pre-planning and a lot of things we had to make up as we went. It took us a couple of weeks, but overall, I feel it was a success, and it got the students what they needed. It got them back on campus. They hadn't really been on campus all during the spring, even though they weren't in the building. They were outside, but they still, the parking lot where they were, the school that they had attended the last 4 years, they had the opportunity to come together. And then feedback that we got from the community on the next slide. Well, there's some more notes, and that's what the actual setup looked like once we got everything constructed and built and decorated. A lot of local businesses donated items, everything from tents to the ferns that you see. All of the decorations were all donated by local businesses to help us out. And then the feedback that we received was overwhelmingly positive. They understood that it was not a traditional graduation, but it was something that allowed kids, or students rather, the opportunity to, again, kind of say goodbye. It gave them that sense of closure that they were looking for. Several of the parents suggested that they liked that better. On campus, families were here from anywhere from 15 to about 30 minutes. So they were able to cycle through, again, with the help of our JROTC program. It went very smoothly. The way that we had the times allotted worked out really well, and everyone was appreciative of what we were able to do. Again, thank you all for allowing us to share today. If you all have any questions for us, feel free to email me. I know Mr. Mullins will be the same way if we can help any schools that are considering doing this, and we'll take suggestions too as we go. Hopefully we'll be back to a more traditional type setting this spring, but we do have this available if it's something that we need.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks, Casey. Great presentation. We appreciate you pulling that together for us, and looks like the kids in Logan County are going to have a great graduation experience. Tony, I think we've got some questions now, and maybe we want to prioritize the questions that are for Dr. White first, because I know that she has to run soon, so we can lift those up and move through those. And then it looks like we've got some other questions around House Bill 208, some questions around ESSER, some questions around these events that we've just been talking about. So lead us through those. Okay,
sounds good. It looks like our first one for DPH that I'm seeing here is, and again, I think some of these questions we tried to kind of get ahead of the game with having her present. So I know some of the questions may have been asked prior to you all submitting them, but I want to make sure that we get to those so you don't feel that we have not answered them. So will there be new guidance that aligns with CDC's guidance that was released yesterday for vaccinated individuals? When working with fully vaccinated people, can vaccinated adults remove their masks?
The person had it right down to the very end part, but no, you will still be asked to wear, well, you will be required by the governor's executive order in the school system to wear your mask, but it is advised that people, even if fully vaccinated, wear their mask when in public. because of that very small chance that you could get infected and could be an asymptomatic spreader. And then the whole variant issue, we don't have a lot of data on that. I think if we didn't have these variants, we would be in a different place, but that's what viruses do. They do mutate. They develop variants. So this is perfectly to be expected. It's how they live their lives. It's how they reproduce and stay around as long as they do. So we are going to be watching what the vaccine does with the B1117, which we already know we have in Kentucky. That's the only variant we found so far, and we are continuing to screen for that. But with the variants, with that unknown, wearing masks and social distancing is still the recommendation anywhere that you are in public, especially in your workplace, especially in a school setting, until we get more information.
Okay, thank you. Our next question for DPH. Our local hospitals have stopped taking temperatures as a mitigation strategy because it's no longer considered a good indicator. Do you foresee that we can stop taking temperatures at events and in the drop-off lines, as this is very labor intensive and thermometers are not very accurate in different weather situations?
Well, right now we have our December version of the flagship document. There is a lot of new information. I mean, we are nowhere now where we were when we first wrote this document. So I will say that we're continuing to look at things. We don't have any new version in the work right this minute, but I will say that we're looking at that. We're looking at all of the deep cleaning and the things that we thought were so critical back at the beginning. All of those things are being looked at, but right now we don't have any kind of document that's been approved for anything yet. So we're still with the other rules until we issue another version of the flagship.
Okay. Question on the new Johnson & Johnson vaccine. Dr. White, with the new quarantine change, how does that apply to this new vaccine? 14 days after the one and only dose, or does it only apply to the 2 dosage vaccines?
That's a really good question. So the first comment was correct. Once you finish your vaccine series 14 days later, then you would not be included in a group that needed to be quarantined. So that means 14 days after your second Pfizer or Moderna dose, or 14 days after your 1 Johnson & Johnson dose.
Okay. The next question that I have is kind of pertaining to athletics and buses. Can we place 1 student per seat sitting next to the window, facing forward with a mask on a bus while transporting athletic teams? We are transporting more students on a bus while transporting them to school than we are to athletic opportunities. For example, 12 athletes only on a 72 passenger bus, every other seat 6 feet apart.
I'm going to ask Dr. Foster if is she here? Because I don't want to, normally I would say, where's Kay? But Kay's not here anymore. She's my bus lady to go to. So maybe Robin can answer that one better than I can.
Yeah, so Robin, can you chime in on that?
Yeah, so I don't think we've made any changes at all to our guidance regarding transporting, in our guidance, and you can look in the guidance document, our updated 2.0. I'll try to put in the chat the specific page that you can find it on, but we haven't made anything from, I think it was back in September when we addressed this issue, so we hadn't made any changes since then. But I'll look for it in the guidance document and put the page so Tony can post it.
The comments are very well founded, and they are things that are being discussed.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to scroll down and see if we have anything else here.
And I meant the comments about the temperature. I didn't mean the bus. The bus is out of my league.
Okay. It looks like we have the same question put in for DPH. I think that's more of a House Bill 208 question, so I can put that one in second. All right, I think that's it for DPH for now. There might be another one that comes through.
There-
Oh, wait, no, I have another one. I see another one here. It looks like, can you clarify what this means in terms of 6 feet between desks? And can we go back to having students no more than 2 to 3 feet apart? If physical space in the school does not allow for spacing students, desks 6 feet apart, space desks as far away as possible. And that was in quotations. I believe that's from our guidance.
I know that in Indiana, I heard Dr. Box, who's the Dr. Stack of Indiana is Dr. Box, and she said that they had looked at their cases in Indiana and had determined that 3 feet was appropriate. That's not a study that we've done and looked at. Do I see that may change down the road? The more data we get, the more we can be much looser with our guidance. We, just as I said before, we haven't changed the flagship document, but we are continuing to look at scientific data as it comes in as to whether and when we will make changes. We're just not there yet. And there was one other question that I read in the Google documents, and it was a question, and I don't know if it would really even be for me, but it's about when will we be able to have visitors in the school facilities. And I know that's a question about long-term care facilities and when are we going to open that up? And I just think that's something the governor is not looking at one metric. I know Ohio says when we have X number of cases and no more than that for 2 weeks, we're going to loosen up some requirements. And I think he's looking at this in a much broader area. So we're looking at cases and we're looking at deaths and we're looking at positivity rate and we're looking at hospital capacity. So there's not a one metric that's going to say, when we get here, we've crossed the Rubicon and everything is fine. I think it's going to be a combination of a lot of things. And then I think those loosening up of restrictions will be very stepwise, and I think there will be baby steps as we're just very cautious that we've gotten this far. Again, it's the variants that are making us extra cautious. We're so close to being to the end, but as Dr. Glass said, we are not out of this completely yet. I mean, we are to the number of cases that we had back in September, and that makes me want to jump up and shout. But think back to September. That's when we were thinking about opening schools, and at that time, we thought we had a lot of cases. So people are still getting sick. People are still in the hospital, or people are on a ventilator right now from COVID-19. People are dying. So even though it is going the direction we want, as someone said the other day, we are not ready to spike the football. This is not, the mission has not been completely accomplished yet. So we just want to be cautious.
Perfect. And the question that was asked on that was,
Tony,
go ahead.
let me clarify that on the 6 feet because you're getting ready to get bombarded with questions. So on
Okay.
page 7 of Healthy at Schools, it clearly says that the 6 feet mitigation between desk is what is recommended. But if you do not have the space in your facility to maintain that 6 feet for every single desk or student, you're just going to kind of need to do the best you can do. And we've talked about that numerous times throughout the last 6 years. Good Lord, I hope we don't have to do this for 6 years.
Feels
so
like
it's
6 years.
Page 7 of Healthy at Schools, it talks about the 6 feet, but if you don't have that space, you are allowed to use less space.
But be very clear. The closer you have your students together, the less safe it is. We've talked also about this is not an option to see how, just cram as many kids as you can in a classroom. And I don't think anybody wants to do that. But this is also not a get out of jail free card. This is if there's absolutely nothing else you can do. You've used your gymnasiums and you've used your cafeterias and you've used your band room and you've used as many big spaces as you can. And you've got an outdoor pavilion that the weather's getting nicer and you're doing classes outside. You're doing everything you possibly can, because the more you keep these kids separated, the fewer illnesses that you are going to have. And I know that's what all of us want.
So 2 quick follow-ups on a couple of those things. So the question that Dr. White was referencing, the question was, what is your guidance when and if it is safe to invite visitors and volunteers into our school buildings? And so Dr. White was responding from the DPH standpoint. I'm not entirely sure if I think that, I mean, KDE staff wants to respond to that. I believe that's going to be, that's a local, if I'm correct, a local, that would be Control Kelly or Robin on that one, or Dr. Glass. If there, I don't know if we're going to give guidance on terms of visitors and allowing volunteers into buildings.
Yeah, so I don't think at this time our buildings are open to visitors or parents to come in for parties or anything like that. You know, we're just trying to have in-face instruction and keep everybody safe. So it wouldn't be the recommendation of the department to start allowing volunteers back in your buildings or, you know, parents for parties or that kind of things. I think we need to kind of wait and see what comes out of the governor's office moving forward about allowing more people in office buildings, school buildings, those type of things.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the short answer is we don't know yet. Not now. We don't recommend that right now, and we don't know when that's going to change. So that's the best we know right now.
Okay, and then a similar question came in with what Dr. Foster and Dr. White were talking about in terms of the 3 foot, 6 foot. They were just suggesting about revised guidance in terms of, you know, we'll be allowed planning for next school year. Hold on, my screen is jumping here. In light of the decreasing positivity rate statewide, new research on the aerosol transmission and implementation of the 3 foot social distancing by other districts and school systems, you know, looking ahead to next school year with mask wearing and adequate ventilation and cleaning protocols. They're just wondering if that might be a possibility coming up for their planning for next year.
So Tony, this is Kelly. KDE and DPH have talked about, you know, possibly updating Healthy at Schools at some time during the summer before the start of the 21-22 school year. So I would definitely expect that there would be new guidance before the next school year starts.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yes. We'll continue to look at new data as it comes in to give you the best scientific evaluation that we can.
Okay. Next question. Do we need to continue to report our virus numbers and quarantine numbers on the Kentucky Online Gateway?
Yes, that's part of the executive order.
Okay. All right. I think that is it right now for Dr. White. And there might be some others that will come in. So if you're able to stick with us, that would be great. I'm going to go over to just the top of the Google form and try to get some of these other questions out of the way. So actually, it looks like there was a question here that might have been in the other column. So if employees have been vaccinated, can they ride together in a board-owned vehicle, i.e. maintenance department, technology department, etc.? If so, are masks required?
I think that as long as you're in public and you're at work, that mask would be the best and safest thing for everyone to do. Whether you're in a vehicle, whether you are in the break room, whether you're in a classroom, that would be the most wise move.
Okay. All right. Going over to an ESSER 2 question, funding question. So this will be for Robin. Will the purchase of Chromebooks with ESSER 2 funds count towards the 85% goal of KDE for spending?
So for the purposes, first of all, districts can purchase Chromebooks from their district allocation. That's perfectly permissible, but Chromebooks would not count as a direct service toward the 85% for access of the state set-aside funds.
Just to follow up on that, so with the 15%, you could purchase Chromebooks with that amount, and then the $75 per student that KDE would be providing, the state set aside, that can be used for Chromebooks too. So you have a couple of other pathways to get to it. And then, of course, as Robin mentioned, we have an ESSER 3 on the horizon that will potentially provide even more dollars. So we don't know a lot about that yet. It's still working its way through Congress, but we believe that that's going to come and that could solve that problem as well.
Okay, this looks like we have a coding question for ESSER 2. If we are not going to meet the 85% direct service recommendation, do we need to have two separate codes for the 554 GD and the 554G for ESSER 2 funds? Or can we just use the 554G? Question mark.
Just use the 554G if you are not going to participate in the opportunity for the state set aside.
Okay. All right, I'm looking to see if we have any other ESSER 2 that I'm seeing come in here. I might have missed one, but let's go over to some PEBT benefits questions. It looks like we have parents can ask the cabinet to reconsider the amount of money on PEB benefits if their children were all virtual in a hybrid school. When will the school need to provide as proof for those families that ask for that amount to be changed?
I'm going to ask if Lauren's still on, if she can kind of respond to that question.
Yes, I am here. That is correct that families will have the opportunity to ask for reconsideration if their student was fully virtual. So in our example that we had on the slide, if their student received 12 days of benefits but should have received 20 days because their child is virtual. As far as the proof for the reconsideration process, that is the process that CHFS is working through that they should have next week. So we will be able to then provide to districts what type of proof CHFS will need to reconsider that request for an individual family.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to see if we have any other PB, try to keep everything related here. I know it doesn't always happen in my world to do that, but let's see if we can try to keep them related. It looks like I don't have any other PBET questions right now. Let's switch over to some House Bill 208 questions. So House Bill 208 requires that a virtual option still be provided. What if a student did not do well on the virtual option this year? Are we allowed to put in requirements for admission to virtual school, such as a participation rate from NTI or a virtual academy this year?
That's a good question, Tony. There is nothing in House Bill 208 that limits which students could take advantage of the continued virtual option. However, obviously, we would encourage districts, and I'll yield to the more academic folks here at KDE, but districts would be encouraged to work with the students and their families to pursue the option that works best for that student's academics and health and safety. But there's nothing that says they cannot go virtual only for the rest of the year, if they so choose. Anybody else on the academic side care to weigh in on that? Okay.
Okay. And then similarly, just assuming that the COVID public health emergency continues to exist into the 21-22 year, I think this might be similar, but does House Bill 208 permit districts to continue a simultaneous in-person, hybrid, and virtual offering for fall 2021?
That is also a good question. It came up several times during the legislative process. But there is nothing in statute and nothing in House Bill 208 that allows districts to offer anything beyond what's already in statute for the 21-22 school year. So we anticipate that all districts would be back in the classroom full-time this fall. If they want to take advantage of the usual NTI flexibilities, which would allow you up to 10 days, you have to submit that plan to KDE by May 1st.
And Chuck, this is David Cook. Just to add to that, I think it is important to note that districts still have under regulation that existed long, 20 years before COVID, performance-based opportunities for students. So they can still offer students virtual learning, and they could create a virtual academy. They can do all of those things. Very different rules about how funding is handled, how attendance is calculated, but I just like to say to people, you're going back to pre-COVID rules about all of that stuff. It's just like it never happened. It's NTI is NTI and performance-based is performance-based, just like it used to be.
Absolutely. And that actually ties into another question I think we got, Tony, about a district that had a virtual academy going this year. So I'll let you ask that and let David speak to that as well.
Yeah, I actually was on. That's where I was going with my next question is with the signing of 208, we have had a virtual academy all year round. And they're just wondering, with that wording, are we expected to bring those students back by March 29th?
Oh, okay. I'm not sure, Chuck, if I can, the 29th, I think you said this earlier, Chuck. I don't think that for the current school year, I don't know if we have to do anything different for those kids that had never gone back into a hybrid model. They were still virtual.
If the students submit a written request, you can keep those students on the virtual model for the rest of this current school year.
Yeah.
And next year you would revert back to statutory, as David was just talking about.
House Bill 208 requires that districts offer that in-person instruction 40% of the time to students and offer and have school open for in-person instruction 80% of the time. It doesn't say that you have to take students that are in virtual schools and move them into an in-person environment.
Yeah. If that's an option they were offering pre-COVID, that simply would continue.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And the question is, will it, so the mandated issue about offering virtual to every student has been answered. That was another question from a different superintendent. But the second part of that question is, will districts be required to let virtual students participate in extracurricular activities?
Nothing is addressed in House Bill 208 on that front. Again, I would yield to the existing guidance that we have, extracurricular activities for those students.
Right. So I think a district would consider how you've handled students that are in virtual or different school models before, and which extracurricular activities or clubs you're allowing them to participate in. I think that just as a best practice, we should think about if we've got a number of students that wish to continue in a virtual model going forward, how can we allow them or expand opportunities for them to participate in extracurricular activities just like any other kid? We should be in the business of providing and expanding opportunities for students regardless of the school setting that they're in.
Okay. All right, I'm going to go back up to another question kind of on NTI. Will a school district hosting 4 days of in-person learning each week be forced to classify the 5th day of the week as an NTI day after March 29th? If so, will that day count towards the 5 NTI days allowed under the new guidance that was released today?
No. If you're doing what I would call a 4-in-1 model, that 1 day each week does not count towards your 5 NTI days. So you are good. If you need to do 1 week, say in April or May, entirely NTI, there's your 5 days. But the 4-in-1 model, you do not have to count that one as that's sort of your built-in 5th day.
Yeah, again, Tony, it's just, again, I say just like I said a minute ago, think about NTI prior to COVID. So these 5 days are the equivalent of 10 days in a normal year. You get 5 days for snow, flood, power being out, whatever the case might be. You don't have to think about if you're doing 4, like Chuck said, 4-in-1, the 1 is not.
Okay. Just another clarification, a superintendent is saying it appears that this it appears that students would be allowed to go back and forth between virtual and in-person whenever they choose. In this particular district, they have not allowed that at different times during the year, or they have allowed that at different points in the year. But they're saying now that it would be difficult to handle with logistics, with transportation, food services, and teaching. Is that now required? Thanks.
I would read that as the HB 208 doesn't really anticipate that students or their families would be choosing to go back and forth. I think I would interpret that as saying that they can stay virtual. If they revoke that written request, they can return to the classroom. But once you've revoked that request, you've made the decision to return to the classroom for the balance of this school year.
Right. I think that, House Bill 208, as Chuck said, doesn't speak specifically to this situation, but I think it's reasonable for a district to put in processes around how you make transitions back and forth and when times would be allowed that could happen, just for the concerns that are raised in the question. It's really impossible to schedule if you had a student going back and forth every other day to try and set that up for them. So I think you could create some windows, you could look at what flexibility you could provide, and then put students into one or the other based on their determination for the year.
As we said earlier, this is not in the bill itself, but we would certainly recommend a template or a form that districts use, a standardized form for students and families to fill out. That might be something that we would highly recommend including in that form when a parent signs that you get one shot to come back and that's it. You can't go back and forth.
Okay. Looks like, I'm not sure if this is kind of the same question. So again, I want to make sure that I'm getting this. So if after March 29th, we are going hybrid model 4 days a week for all students, does the 1 day a week we are all virtual count towards the 5 limit of NTI days from March 29th to the end of the year?
And that's essentially the same question that we just answered a few minutes ago. As long as you're doing that 4 days a week, that 5th day is sort of built into the calendar. It does not count as one of your 5 NTI days.
Okay. And then for another clarification concerning 208, will we be required? Well, it looks like we already answered that question, and or along with students attending at least 80% of the time, quote, in-person options. The virtual options, are we required? I think we've addressed that question. So I'll go ahead and mark that one.
That seems to be a common question today.
Yes, it is. Just wanted to, there's a clarification point that the words remote and virtual are being used simultaneously and that they are different. Does House Bill 208 or any other order require remote or virtual learn or either? So I guess, is there a requirement of remote or virtual or either?
I don't think either of those are the required. If the students are not in the classroom, anything NTI related is eligible. I will defer to David on that, but
yeah, I think Tony, if I'm hearing the question correctly, and I think Dr. Glass mentioned that, was inferring this a little bit earlier. If you're doing your hybrid or your remote, if you're doing your hybrid models or your in-person models, you still have a requirement on those days that you're not in person. You have to do teaching and learning for those kids, right? So the 60% of the time that the kid is not sitting in a seat for a hybrid model, you can't just say we're not doing anything on the days they're not in person. So you still have a virtual obligation if you're doing a hybrid model. You don't get out of having virtual opportunities, especially if you have a hybrid approach in your district. You're still required to do remote learning, virtual learning on the days that the kids are not in person.
Okay. All right, there's another question in here about our ATCs. There's a specific question on that one. Let me get over to that one. Let me just check. David Horseman, are you on? Just want to, before I get into this, I want to make sure you're on to help me with this one.
Yes. I'm here.
Okay. All right. When do you anticipate removal of the travel ban for area technology centers? We would like our students to be able to work on real life projects. In this particular county, the students that are working in the new school cannot even work on a carpentry project, which is approximately 3 miles away. So they're just wondering, there's a lot of potential that they could be at a work site in the morning and then et cetera. So they're just wanting to know with the restrictions when there might be a removal of the travel ban.
Well, we're working on some transitioning, as you know, from where we have been and where we're going. But I think in this instance that there should be enough flexibility in the work-based learning guidance that students could have those experiences. And I would suggest that Mason County get in touch with our field supervisor there, and we try to work through that with them. I know we're working on, as we're opening up more, allowing for our folks to go purchase supplies and those kinds of things. And if they're taking a whole class to a work site, then they would be transporting them on the bus, and they already have protocols for that. So I think it depends on the particular situation, but I believe we can work through that with our local supervisor there.
David, could you follow up with Mason County and see if we can problem solve this situation with them?
Sure, certainly will.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to go back up. It looks like we have a couple more that are coming in. I just want to make sure I reformat this, so I've got them all here. It looks like there might be some more for Dr. White. Dr. White, are you still with us?
I am here.
Perfect. Let's see here. All right. Looks like if we are unable to space the 6 feet apart in a classroom and have a student who becomes positive, do we quarantine those students who are less than 6 feet apart from that positive child? And how many feet are you recommending? 3 feet, 4 feet? We are having to do the contact tracing in our schools.
6 feet. That's the recommendation. That's what's in the flagship document. So yes, if you're not 6 feet apart, wearing a mask all the time, and you're in contact with someone for more than 15 minutes, that student would be quarantined.
Okay. The next question is, can children remove their masks while at recess outdoors if staying 6 feet apart?
I believe that is in the guidance. Dr. Foster, I don't have it in front of me, but I believe that if you're outdoors and more than 6 feet apart, the mask can be taken off. But if you're playing on a playground, you're probably not going to be out there by yourself.
Correct. Okay. The next question that I have, as I go back to the top of my form here. Okay, so another clarification from that particular superintendent was he was asking if virtual, meaning something digital, is required, or if they can have learning quote unquote packets or other assignments, non-digital learning materials are allowed. He said virtual seems to imply digital materials provide, whereas remote does not.
So House Bill 208 talks about remote instruction, which would include both of those that the superintendent is discussing.
Okay.
I think that should help answer the question for those students who may not have access and need a written packet. It seems that would be permitted.
Okay, thank you, Todd. All right, the next question, we have a couple more on NTI. I'm trying to go back to that format there. Looks like on 208, students may submit written requests to continue remote instructions. That it's on our slide. We've had both in-person and virtual learning already taking place. In many cases, the parent request was a phone call to the school or even a text several months ago. Does the House Bill 208 wording mean we now have to go back to those families to get a formal written notice, or would this written request requirement only apply to instructional model change requests submitted after March 29th?
So House Bill 208 requires the school district to provide remote instruction upon written request from a parent. However, nothing in House Bill 208 would prevent the school district from going ahead and providing that remote instruction based on a phone request from a parent. It just guarantees the parent the right to remote instruction if they submit a written request. So there's nothing that requires school districts to go back and get that in writing.
So I think to summarize, Todd, it's if a student has already requested virtual instruction or remote instruction, is receiving that, the district doesn't have to go back and sort of revalidate that.
That's right.
Okay. Another question, just, I'm not sure what this looks like. I'm not sure what this pertains to, which topic on the agenda. So please clarify why student technology devices are not considered a direct service. Devices have been our primary tool for remote instruction.
Sure, I'll take that one. Yeah. So the KDE portion, or the KDE set aside that is made available to district, really is an incentive to do two things. It's to restore that minimum in-person instruction by April 1st, which now with House Bill 208 is also law, so everybody's going to get there on that one. And it's to have districts create meaningful learning experiences and direct services to students. It certainly is a values decision or a judgment call, or whether or not a Chromebook qualifies as a direct service. In my professional opinion, it does not. And I was the one who made the decision that Chromebooks would not count toward that 85%. There are certainly those out there who disagree with that decision. I happen to think it was the right one and stand by it. And there are other ways you can get to purchasing Chromebooks with the funds that you have available. And I'd also say that you don't have to take this $75 per student that KDE is offering. You can certainly spend the funds as long as it falls within the federal limitations and requirements. You can spend them however you want. So I think that there is flexibility in both the KDE portion and in the 15% to make Chromebook purchases, but I certainly also respect that if some of you were making the decision, you would have included Chromebooks as a direct service. I don't think it's a direct service.
Okay. All right, sounds good. It looks like the next question we can get to, looks like found out yesterday in the Commissioner's Monday message regarding the delay of the KYCL Round 2 awards. The original date was March, now October, so professional development funds, et cetera, are in question. Is it possible to know at the minimum if a district has been awarded the grant knowing the funds would not be released until October? Mickey, are you on? Can you answer that one for me?
Yes, thank you, Tony. So the KDE will actually receive notification of the federal contract in September. And after that time, awardees will be notified all at once. But knowing that that delay is happening, the KDE will work with grant awardees to help them plan for professional learning and for implementation, certainly taking into consideration that later start date. And we will make sure that districts are supported to accommodate that change.
Okay. All right, let's see here. Next question. If we have to move one school in our district to NTI learning for whatever reason, but the other schools can remain open to in-person learning, does that count against our 5 days of NTI? Are the 5 days school specific?
Chuck and Todd can speak to that. I would not interpret it that way because, again, NTI is when the district is closed to in-person instruction. In this situation you just described, Tony, the district isn't closed. A school is closed, and that would just be the same as sort of a hybrid approach on that one day or however many days that is. Those kids in that one school, it's the same thing, really great thing that a couple of districts are doing right now, which is they're bringing all the juniors in to do the ACT today. but everybody else is out. That's not an NTI. That would not, if it had happened after March 29th, it's different because you've not closed the district. You've closed a school. And we've never approached NTI as a school level program. It's always been a district level program.
Yeah.
Okay, just a quick clarification for the prior question about the transportation of students on the bus. Just to notate, you can use our new guidance document, the 2.0 document. If you go to pages 107 to 108, that is where all of our guidance on the refreshed guidance that we have put in there is on. So pages 107 and 108 on transportation of students. Thank you, Robin, for sending me that note. The next question is, do we anticipate that parents will be allowed to request remote learning for next school year, 2021-22? Should we prepare now that requiring in-person for all students will not be permitted for next year?
Well, based on House Bill 2.8, I don't think we know that yet. There's certainly a pathway by which a district can establish a remote or virtual school now. One of the concerns I know that's out there is the funding model that's on that is problematic, especially if you had a large number of students that ended up shifting over to that structure. Internally at KDE, we are looking at the funding structure for virtual schools and how that operates, trying to determine are the limitations that require that students in a virtual school to be funded in a reimbursement model. Is that something that we have control over at KDE because it's in regulation, or the state board has control over it, or is it something that's in statute that we need a statutory change on? So we're working on that right now, but I do understand that it is a major concern. The funding structure for virtual schools is problematic in Kentucky, given the number of students that we may have requesting it for next year. But I think it's going to be up to each district to decide what your school configuration is. But I also think that it is the case you're going to have a lot of parents demanding or asking for virtual options after this experience, because it's been successful for some students.
Okay. Thank you. The next question, if the student has not participated with virtual learning throughout the school year, can the school district require the student to participate with in-person learning?
So again, House Bill 208 would provide the parent the ability to demand in a writing to the school district the ability to participate remotely. So that the school district could not require that student to learn in person.
Okay, thank you, Todd. Another question has popped in here just now on ESSER 2. If there are a number of districts that do not accept the $75 per student of ESSER 2 funds by May 15th, will there be a reallocation of those funds?
Yes, we will spend them.
So not necessarily a reallocation to districts, but we will, since that pot of money is part of the state set aside, the commissioner has shared that lots of projects were submitted by the KDE leadership staff that would benefit local school districts as a whole primarily. And we'll go back and revisit all those projects and think about how we can best utilize those funds. So not necessarily a reallocation to districts though.
We may want to keep in mind that we have this third wave of funding on the horizon with the American Recovery Program that's sitting in Congress right now, that it will be double what this funding is for ESSER 2. So I think there may be more flexibility coming for districts with that additional infusion of funds. But okay. More, I guess, directly to this question, no, we're not planning on changing the rules on this now, but we will expend these dollars. And I want to note that the state set aside on this, there is no expectation that these funds go to districts. There's no entitlement that they go to districts, therefore the state agency to determine their use. So we've created a way whereby districts can get access to a portion of it, but it's up to districts to decide if you want to access that or not.
Okay. All right. I think that I'm going to just refresh my screen. If there was any other, I don't see any other questions in here right now, but I'm just going to keep going. I'm going to just refresh to make sure I haven't missed anything here.
Tony, did we get that question from Newport?
Look, that might have been towards the beginning there, towards the top there. I knew I was going to forget one at the top. All right. Yes. Let me get to that one there. Planning for next school year. Will we be allowed to schedule all virtual days? For example, if we wanted to do a teacher training day and have interventions for some students in the building, could we have the rest of the school on virtual learning? Thank you there, Dr. Glass.
Well, I think this is, you can return to what NTI was like before. So if you wanted to have an NTI day so you could have a full staff professional development day, I think you can schedule that up to the 10 days that are allowed by law. I'll defer to any of the other KDE staff that are on if I'm misinformed, but I think the answer to that is yes, you can schedule those days.
I would say, Dr. Glass, it also, you've got other options inside your calendar for teacher professional development planning days, those kinds of things too. I think you're exactly right. I think the question would be, I'm just gonna stop there. I could get in. There's a whole lot of things you could think about in terms of those kind of. Again, it's almost like a hybrid day is now.
Well, and Todd has added in there that, just a reminder that NTI by statute is only for health and safety.
That's correct.
And emergency closure. So that's a good thing to keep in mind with the NTI.
Okay, great. So thank you, Todd. That reflects my newness to the state, not knowing that. So I think then you would only call it an NTI day if it was a health or safety closure, but you certainly could schedule learning activities for students remotely on a day that you had professional learning happening for staff. Your students would just be working asynchronously on that day.
All right. I think if you want to check me, I think I've marked all of the questions that have come in related to these agenda item topics. There was a question on some other legislation that has not passed yet, and we can work directly with you to answer that question. I think that's it. So Commissioner, I will hand it back to you unless I see another one come in here within the next minute or two. I will let you know, but I think that is it. Our next superintendent webcast will be Tuesday, April 13th, just FYI.
Okay. Thanks, Tony, and thanks everyone for taking part. We especially want to thank our guest, Dr. White, for always being on with us and being able to answer our questions. We want to thank our superintendents from Hardin and from Logan County, and our principal from Logan County High School being on to share their models. We are really appreciate that. I think this, this question and answer time, I think of it as kind of hypothetical hour. We answer a lot of hypothetical questions that people have in this time. We do our best to provide direct answers to them. If there's something that we're not able to get to in terms of clarity or detail, please follow up with us, and we're happy to do more research to try and determine exactly the situation that you're facing and provide guidance to you on how to handle that. But we do appreciate the questions, appreciate the engagement that everyone has. Dr. Woodstucker, I see that you're on. Is there something that you wanted to add?
No, you all nailed everything. And if there's anything I can do to assist, as you know, I recently left the superintendency. So as you look at your graduation plans or your plans for prom and you want to bounce some ideas off me, I'm more than happy to assist you. And it keeps me excited.
Thanks, Dr. Woodstucker. Thanks, everybody, and we'll see you again on Tuesday the 13th.
Thank you, Commissioner Glass.